Hello everybody, welcome to the Pen Habit. My name's Matt Armstrong, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at my very first pen from the fountain pen company Cross. Before we begin, by way of disclaimer and by way of thanks, I want to thank Gold Spot Pens for providing the pen for this review. This pen was provided free of charge in exchange for a fair review. No other compensation was provided, and this all opinions expressed in this review are my own, and I hope are not influenced by the fact that I received the pen free of charge. So when it comes to Cross pens, I've never had any experience with the brand before. I'm aware of the brand. It's been in my collective consciousness for longer than I've been using fountain pens, but perhaps not in the best of ways. So when I first started the fountain pen hobby a few years ago, Cross was the brand that you found in their cheap blister packs on the dusty shelf at the back of your Staples or Office Max or Office Depot, where it had maybe an ink cartridge, but you couldn't even buy additional ink cartridges at the store. They looked bad, they probably didn't write very well, and they were probably a little overpriced for what they were. At least that was my impression of Cross pens. And then recently I've seen a couple of threads on FP Geeks or on Reddit about what is Cross's reputation these days in the fountain pen community. And I think Cross just doesn't get a lot of attention in the fountain pen community these days. They've been around for a long time. They're very well known. Cross is the provider of the pens that the US president uses to sign laws into, or sign bills into law. And so they've been around, and they're a well-known entity, but people don't talk about them a lot in the fountain pen community, I find. So when Gold Spot Pens reached out to me and asked me, what's a pen you'd like to review? I said, I'd like to see one of the middle to upper tier Cross pens, because I've never played with the brand anymore. And I wanted to get a sense, what's going on here? So they very kindly obliged and provided me this Century 2. So it comes in this brown cardboard box with the Cross logo across the top here, slides out to expose a kind of curvy brown pen coffin. Also has this little folder with the warranty and booklet instructions on the inside. You can see that here in several different languages. And then you open up the pen coffin to see the pen itself. It's under this little plastic case. I'll set that aside and pull the pen out. Now it does come with a converter and a couple of cartridges. I do want to point out that this converter is very oddly shaped. I have gone off on harangues in the past about proprietary converters. I don't feel terribly different about them. I will say that this converter works well, so I can't complain too much, but it's so oddly shaped, and because I don't find Cross pens around a lot, sometimes I think it might be hard to find replacements for these if you needed to. Then we get to the pen. Now, this is the blue and sterling silver variety of the Century 2. You can see here it comes with a nice blue lacquered finish, metal-bodied pen, a sterling silver cap. We'll start up here at the top. It's got a little lacquered dot in the center of the cap, and then a lacquered line that makes it look like this is a finial, but it's actually part of the cap. I think this is probably formed out of a single piece. The clip is sturdy, but it is kind of, they punched holes into the side and attached it with prongs. This is probably my least favorite method of attaching a pen clip, because it feels like with a little bit of force you could just pop this right off. Now clearly I haven't tried that, but that's what it feels like. The cap itself, starts off at kind of a flattened point and then comes down to a straight cylinder with a little flange down here at the bottom. Got the vertical lines that run the length of the cap. I do like that design element just a little bit. Now I will say that because this is a sterling silver cap, it can pick up fingerprints, and it is a little bit prone to tarnish. I haven't had a significant tarnishing, but I could see that becoming an issue over a long period of time. Then the pen comes down almost in a straight cylinder to about here, then it tapers and flattens off to a flat end at the bottom. It is a very slender pen, and I'll get back to this a little bit later on when we talk about how it fits in the hand. But this is a very, very slender pen. And it's one of those things that I wish most of Cross's pens that I've seen in person anyway tend to run on the slender side of things. This is an area where I feel like Cross relies on tradition a little bit more than what customers actually want. I feel like if they made some thicker pens with girthier grips, they might sell more of them, because I think there is a large segment of the modern fountain pen population that doesn't like using these very slender pens. I've got number 2 pencils that are thicker around than this pen is. Anyway, back to the pen design. It's a pop-top cap, very smooth mechanism. It does feel a little wobbly when it's on. I've never had it come off, and it clicks pretty well in place. But when it's in place, it does feel a little wobbly. This is a pen I might feel a little uncomfortable putting in a shirt pocket, just because I'd be afraid that the barrel would come off of the cap. You open it up, and you've got a plastic section. It's got those vertical grooves in it as well. Let's see if I can get the light on it here so you can see those vertical grooves. Comes down to a little silver flange here. And then you have a really ornately stamped Cross 18 karat gold rhodium plated nib. It's a small nib. I'd say probably number 5-ish in size. I don't know that it exactly is a number 5, but that's about the size of it. Pretty standard, run-of-the-mill plastic feed. And then the pen, as I mentioned, is a cartridge converter pen. The barrel is brass. The flange on the section is metal, so this is not an eyedropper convertible pen. And then you've got that really unusual Cross. I want to do this, see if I can do this without making a mess. Very unusual Cross converter in here as well. So, and it is threaded, which I do like. I like threaded converters quite a bit. So all in all, it's a nice pen. It feels very well constructed, and fairly good in the hand, but I'll come back to that in just a second. It does post. It is the size that it is of a short enough size unposted. I could write with it unposted if I wanted to, but this is a pen I actually prefer to post. I will say that the design feels just a little dated. It feels like this particular design has been around for a few decades and hasn't been updated a lot. It's very different than a lot of other things out on the market, but you can take one look at this and go, this is a Cross. Now, that can be good or not so good. I think of the Lamy 2000, which is an iconic design. It's in the it's in the Museum of Modern Art, and it's been around for 60 years. And they haven't really changed the design in 60 years. They haven't changed the design. It feels like they haven't changed the design on this for a while, but instead of feeling classic, it just feels a little dated to me. But in terms of build quality, it's very nicely built. It posts quite securely. And now let's talk a little bit about how it feels in the hand, because this is a weird place for me. If you've watched a lot of my videos, I tend to like my pens to be, the grip on my pens to be somewhere in the 10 to 11 millimeter range. This is significantly narrower. It's 8.5 millimeters, so it feels like I'm holding a pencil, like a mechanical pencil, one of those cheap ones, or even a wooden pencil. It's much narrower than I normally like. With this extra length, though, with the cap posted, I find that it's not as uncomfortable as I would have hoped. You'll notice that because this is a pop-off cap, the transition between the barrel and the section is there's not much of a step down. It's quite smooth. So I can grip this pen a little bit further up, which makes it much more comfortable for me. If I had to grip it down here, I wouldn't like it, but the section is nice and long and the transition smooth, so it doesn't matter. So while this pen is narrower than I like, I don't find it terribly uncomfortable. With the narrower grips, I personally tend to grip my pen a little harder, and so I found myself cramping up in the hand just a little bit more than normal. But if you're one of those people who likes a narrower grip, I think you'll like this a lot. It's got a really good feel to it. And the decision to put those vertical lines in the plastic section is brilliant. I wish more companies would texture their sections in some way because it just gives it a nice, slightly grippier feel. Okay, so I do want to show you how it writes, and I'll give you a little preview surprisingly well. But I want to go through the specs on the pen first. So if we're looking at the pen, we've got 135 millimeters in length like this. When you uncap the pen, you are looking at 123.5 millimeters, so a little on the shorter side. As I mentioned, it posts quite deeply and quite securely though, and when posted, you are looking at a total length of 154.6 millimeters. And just for comparison to a couple of pens that I've got floating around right now, here's the Pelikan M1000. Actually, let me cap this so you can see the size comparison. Here's the cross, the Pelikan M1000, the Jinhao X450, the Pelikan M805. Let's see if I've got any other ones over here. The Pelikan M205, and oh, can't see that one. Let me turn it this way. And the Aurora Optima. So you can see that this is a very, very, very slender pen. This is especially compared to the Jinhao or the Pelikans, the upper end Pelikans here. So get those out of the way. In terms of grip, as I mentioned, it's 8.5 millimeters in the middle of the section. You're looking at 9.7 millimeters on the barrel and a svelte 11.5 at the widest point of the cap. So as I said, slender pen, a little too slender for my tastes. And then in terms of weight, just the pen by itself, inked up with a converter, is 16 grams, metal-bodied pen, so it's going to be a little on the heavier side for a pen of this size. The cap adds an extra 10 grams for a total of 26 grams. So that is the Cross Century 2 in sterling and blue, or blue and sterling. Let me do a little bit of writing, tell you about how much the pen costs and a couple of other provisos, and then we'll wrap up. So here we go with the writing sample. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and post the pen, and the review is for a Cross Century 2 blue and sterling. We have a medium 18 karat gold nib, and the ink for today is Iroshizuku Kujaku. I've said this before, I'm going to repeat myself. My hunch is you're going to be seeing a lot of Kujaku in my reviews coming up. I am trying to empty one bottle of ink, just one. All of these bottles behind me, I have yet to empty a single bottle of ink. Iroshizuku Kujaku is one of the ones I'm closest to emptying, so I'm going to be using it a lot coming up. It's about time I empty a bottle of ink. It'll help me feel a little less bad about buying so much behind me. Anyway, we're on a Rhodia dot pad, as we always are for these reviews. And now, here is your quote. All right. Now I will say that because I can hold this pen so far back from the paper, I actually like what it does to my handwriting. This would be much neater if I weren't on a dot pad. I stick with a dot pad because that's what I That's what I started doing my reviews on. But for my daily writing, I use lined paper. I just don't care for the dot pad, the dot grid very much in my day-to-day writing. So with an 18 karat nib, you actually you can push a little bit of line variation out of it. It is pretty rigid though, so I wouldn't recommend doing that too much. But man, this nib is so smooth. I don't know where my preconceived notion that cross nibs are just terrible came from, but that was kind of the notion I had, and this nib has just been wonderful to write with. A little hint of feedback, but really nothing too bad. Barely requires any pressure on the paper at all to get writing. It writes so wonderfully smoothly. In terms of wetness, it's actually pretty darn wet. It puts down a decent amount of ink, which I like. It's not too much though, which is good. Let me see if we can do this here. You can push just a little bit of extra line variation out of it. I do like that it's flexible is the wrong word, but it gives enough that there's a nice bounce to the nib. And that's the thing that as I use fountain pens more and as I start to refine my own personal handwriting style, I find that a nib that gives me a little bit of bounce when I write, and this, you can tell that I used to direct music because that's kind of how I write with my hands. It's kind of that bouncy da 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 da. And when you get a rhythm going with your handwriting, that little bit of bounce for me really helps to get the feel right on the nib. It helps me to get a nice rhythm and keep my letters a little bit more consistent. So this has a very nice bounce to it, despite it being a very small nib. Very nice feel, very smooth, nicely wet. In terms of reverse writing, quite good. Little tiny bit scratchy on the cross strokes in this direction, but everything else is really quite nice. Does give you a finer line, but nicely wet finer line. I have to say, I am very pleasantly surprised with the way this pen writes. Now, I will say also that if Cross could take this nib and put it on a pen that has a little bit more girth to it, especially if they made that pen out of something other than metal, I think they'd have a real big fan out of me because I love the way this writes. It's just too narrow for me. And so many of Cross's pens are so narrow feeling that for me, this probably isn't a keep in my collection forever pen, but it's such a good writer. It's going to stick around for at least a little while. And eventually I will probably find it a new home with someone who likes these thinner barreled pens. But surprisingly good writer. Now, in terms of price, Gold Spot Pens has this pen on their website for $146. They did inform me when I asked for this particular pen that this may be discontinued because it did not appear in the 2016 catalog. So if you like this color combination, you might want to look for it pretty quickly because it may not be around much longer. Now, the Century 2 comes in a whole variety of different finishes and runs the price range anywhere from about $60 to over $300, depending on, is it all sterling silver? Is it all stainless steel? Is it black? Is it black with a silver cap? Is it 10 karat gold? I mean, there's a whole bunch of different varieties of this pen. Is it one of the botanical prints? So you can get the Century 2 in a bunch of different styles. If they all have the 18 karat nib and they all write as well as this one, and you enjoy that thinner grip, I think this is a pen you will like quite a bit. All right, I think that should do it for my review of the Cross Century 2. A huge thank you again to Gold Spot Pens for providing this pen for review purposes. Please allow me to encourage you to head over to goldspot.com and look through their great catalog, place an order on their site. And if you do place an order, please let them know that the Pen Habit sent you and thank them for their wonderful support of the blog and of this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the video below or over at penhabit.com. You can also find me on Twitter and Facebook etc., etc., etc. The same spiel I give at the end of every video because I tend to repeat myself. I don't know if you've noticed that or not. Thanks for watching. We will see you here next time on The Pen Habit.